Between 2002 and 2004, 73 people vanished in Sedona, Arizona. The police said they'd found enlightenment and walked away from their old lives. The spiritual community said they'd ascended to a higher plane. The families were told their loved ones had chosen to disconnect, to start over, to embrace a new reality. But I found their bodies, all of them, in a compound 20 miles into the desert, hidden in a canyon that doesn't appear on any map. And they hadn't found enlightenment. They hadn't ascended. They'd found something much worse. They'd found a company that saw human consciousness as a product to be tested, refined, and sold. My name is Michael Torres. I'm 48 years old. I'm an investigative journalist, or I was, before this story destroyed my career and nearly destroyed my life. I've spent the last 3 years investigating what happened in Sedona. What I discovered isn't just a story about missing people. It's a story about how easy it is to make someone disappear when you convince the world they wanted to vanish. It's a story about how a small desert town became a laboratory for human experimentation. And it's a story about how corporations can commit mass murder and call it enlightenment. This is what I found. Sedona sits in the high desert of northern Arizona, about 2 hours north of Phoenix. If you've never been there, it's hard to describe. The landscape is dominated by massive red rock formations that rise from the desert floor like ancient cathedrals. Cathedral Rock, Bell Rock, Devil's Bridge. The rocks glow orange and red at sunset, creating one of the most beautiful landscapes in America. It's a small town, about 10,000 permanent residents, but it draws millions of tourists every year, and it's become synonymous with New Age spirituality. The reputation started in the 1980s, when a psychic named Paige Bryant claimed to have identified 4 energy vortexes in Sedona. Places where the Earth's energy was supposedly concentrated, creating powerful spiritual experiences. Scientists dismiss the vortex theory as pseudoscience, but that doesn't matter. People believe, and belief is powerful. By the late 90s, Sedona had transformed into a spiritual tourism destination. Dozens of businesses offered vortex tours, crystal healing, aura photography, past life regression, shamanic journeys. Some of it was harmless. People seeking meaning, finding comfort in ritual and community. But some of it was predatory, and one company was more predatory than all the others combined. Red Rock Wellness Corporation. Founded in 1998 by a man named Dr. Marcus Aldrich. On paper, it was a wellness company offering retreats, meditation classes, and spiritual guidance. In reality, it was something else entirely, but I didn't know that in 2002. Nobody did. I first heard about Sedona's disappearances in 2005, a year after they'd stopped. I was working for a magazine that covered fringe stories, unexplained phenomena, conspiracy theories. We weren't respectable journalism, but we paid attention to stories mainstream outlets ignored. Someone sent me an email. Anonymous. The subject line said, 73 people missing in Sedona. Nobody's looking for them. The email contained a list of names, dates, and brief descriptions. Jennifer Huang, 34, disappeared March 2002, software engineer from San Francisco, came to Sedona for spiritual retreat, last seen at Red Rock Wellness Center, family filed missing person report. Case closed after 3 weeks, classified as voluntary disappearance. Robert and Susan Mitchell, both 52, disappeared July 2002. Married couple from Ohio. Attended weekend workshop at Red Rock Wellness. Never returned home. Credit cards and bank accounts untouched after disappearance. Police investigation lasted 2 weeks. Closed. Classified as voluntary. The list went on and on. 73 names, all between March 2002 and February 2004. All had some connection to Red Rock Wellness Corporation. All were officially classified as adults who'd chosen to disappear. I started making calls. I contacted families. Most were still desperate for answers. They told me the same story over and over. Their loved one had gone to Sedona seeking something, healing, meaning, a fresh start. They'd signed up for programs at Red Rock Wellness, and then they'd vanished. Some families had received letters, brief, vague messages saying they'd found what they were looking for and needed to disconnect from their old lives. The letters felt wrong, the families said. The language wasn't right. The handwriting was similar, but not quite the same. But the police didn't care. Adults have the right to disappear. No crime had been committed. Case closed. In June 2005, I flew to Sedona. I rented a car and drove up from Phoenix, watching the landscape change from sprawl to desert to those impossible red rocks rising against the blue sky. It was beautiful. It felt sacred, even to a cynic like me. I understood why people came here seeking transcendence. The town itself was small, built along a winding highway that cut through the rock formations. Art galleries, crystal shops, restaurants with names like the Secret Garden Cafe and Illumination, and everywhere, signs advertising vortex tours, energy healing, spiritual awakening. I started with the police. The Sedona Police Department was small, just a couple dozen officers serving the town and surrounding area. I spoke with Detective Sarah Chen, who'd handled most of the missing person cases. She was professional, but clearly frustrated. "Look," she said, "I know how this looks. 73 people in 2 years. But every single case was the same. Adults, no signs of foul play, last seen at wellness centers or spiritual retreats, often leaving notes or messages saying they wanted a fresh start. We investigated. We looked for evidence of coercion or crime. There was nothing. What about Red Rock Wellness specifically?" I asked. "A lot of the missing people were connected to that company." She shifted uncomfortably. "Red Rock Wellness is a legitimate business, licensed, insured. They cooperated fully with every investigation. Their lawyer was very helpful, actually. Provided records, schedules, statements from staff. Everything checked out. Did you find it strange that so many people associated with one company decided to abandon their lives? People come to Sedona looking for transformation," she said. "Sometimes they find it. Sometimes that means leaving everything behind. It's not illegal to disappear if you're an adult. It's not even unusual here." I could tell she believed what she was saying, but I could also tell she wasn't comfortable with it. I visited Red Rock Wellness the next day. The facility was impressive, a sprawling compound built into the base of a red rock formation about 5 miles outside of town. Adobe-style buildings arranged around courtyards with fountains and gardens. It looked expensive, exclusive, the kind of place that costs thousands of dollars per week. I'd called ahead and scheduled a consultation. They didn't know I was a journalist. I told them I was interested in their transformation programs, that I was seeking spiritual awakening. They were more than happy to see me. A woman named Melissa greeted me at the entrance, mid-30s, attractive, with that serene smile that people in the wellness industry perfect. She led me through the compound, explaining the philosophy. Red Rock Wellness is founded on the principle that human consciousness can be elevated through proper guidance and environmental attunement, she said. We work with the natural energy vortexes of Sedona to facilitate breakthrough experiences. What kind of experiences, I asked. Depends on the individual. Some people experience profound emotional release. Others report enhanced intuition, clarity of purpose, connection to something greater than themselves. Our programs are customized to each client's needs. She showed me the meditation halls, the treatment rooms, the residential quarters where clients stayed during multi-day programs. Everything was beautiful, clean, peaceful. We ended the tour at a building she called the Integration Center. It was larger than the others, with fewer windows and thicker walls. This is where we conduct our most intensive programs, Melissa explained. The Ascension Protocol. It's our flagship offering. 7 days of guided transformation using advanced meditation techniques, biofeedback technology, and what we call conscious reconditioning. What does that mean exactly? It means we help people let go of limiting beliefs and behavioral patterns that no longer serve them. It's intense. Not everyone is ready for it. But for those who are, the results are life-changing. She gave me that serene smile again. Many of our Ascension Protocol graduates choose to extend their time with us. Some decide to join our residential community permanently. They find that the outside world no longer aligns with who they've become. A chill ran down my spine. How many people are in this residential community? That varies. We have spaces for up to 80 residents. Right now, we're at about 60. Can I meet some of them? The smile didn't change. Our residents value their privacy. They've come here specifically to disconnect from their former lives. We respect that boundary. I asked more questions, but she deflected smoothly. When I tried to push about the missing people, about the connection between Red Rock Wellness and the disappearances, she became concerned. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said. If you're here to make accusations rather than genuinely explore our programs, I'll have to ask you to leave. I left. But I'd seen enough to know something was very wrong. I spent the next 2 weeks in Sedona talking to people. Employees who'd worked at Red Rock Wellness and quit. Former clients who'd attended programs but not the Ascension Protocol. Local business owners. What I learned painted a disturbing picture. Red Rock Wellness had opened in 1998 under Dr. Marcus Aldrich. Aldrich had a PhD in neuroscience from Stanford and had worked in pharmaceutical research for 15 years before moving to Sedona. The company started small, just basic meditation and wellness retreats. But in 2001, something changed. They launched the Ascension Protocol, and they started recruiting aggressively. They targeted people who were vulnerable. People going through divorces, career crises, grief. People who came to Sedona seeking answers. The program was expensive, $15,000 for 7 days. But they offered payment plans, even loans through a partner finance company. They made it accessible to people who couldn't actually afford it. A former employee named David Reeves agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Flagstaff, 30 miles from Sedona. He'd worked as a facilitator at Red Rock Wellness from 2000 to 2003. I quit because I couldn't be part of it anymore, he told me. At first, I believed in what we were doing. Helping people, genuine transformation. But after the Ascension Protocol started, everything changed. What was different about it? The techniques. They used sensory deprivation, binaural beats, repetitive messaging. It was psychological manipulation dressed up as spiritual practice. And there was a substance they gave people. They called it sacred water, said it came from a natural spring at a vortex site. Enhanced receptivity to the teachings. What was really in it? I don't know. I never saw where it came from. It was always pre-bottled, sealed. But people who drank it became extremely suggestible, compliant. They'd accept anything the facilitators told them. Did you report this to anyone? He laughed bitterly. I tried. I went to the police. They said it sounded like standard meditation retreat stuff. I went to the health department. They said unless someone filed a complaint or got sick, there was nothing they could do. Red Rock Wellness had lawyers, good ones. They made it very clear that if I kept talking, they'd destroy me with defamation suits. What happened to the people who went through the program? Some of them seemed fine. They completed the 7 days, went home, left positive reviews. But others... He trailed off. Others stayed. They'd finished the program and then asked to extend. A week became 2 weeks, became a month. They'd stop contacting their families, stop responding to messages, and then they'd just disappear into the residential community. We weren't allowed into that part of the compound. Only senior staff and Dr. Aldrich. Did you ever see any of them again? No. Once someone joined the residential community, they were gone. We were told they'd chosen a path of deeper commitment, that they were undergoing advanced training. But I always wondered, because the numbers didn't add up. The residential building could house maybe 80 people comfortably, but over 3 years I saw hundreds of people enter that program, way more than 80. So where did they all go? I needed to know what was in that sacred water. I went back to Red Rock Wellness and signed up for a basic day program. Nothing intensive, just a meditation class and vortex tour. The goal was to get a sample of the water. It was surprisingly easy. During the tour, the guide offered us sacred water. She poured it from a large glass bottle into small cups. This water has been collected from the most powerful vortex site in Sedona, she explained. Drinking it helps open your consciousness to receive the energy of this sacred place. And I drank mine and discreetly pocketed an empty cup with residue in it. After the tour ended, I drove straight to Phoenix and found a private laboratory that would do a rush analysis. 3 days later, I got the results. The water contained dimethyltryptamine, DMT, a powerful psychedelic compound, not in huge doses, but enough to create altered states of consciousness. It also contained MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy, which increases feelings of trust and emotional openness. And there was a third compound the lab couldn't identify, something synthetic, something that shouldn't have been in water from a natural spring. I took the lab results to the police. Detective Chen was alarmed, but cautious. "This is serious," she said, "but it's complicated. We'd need to get a warrant to search Red Rock Wellness. To do that, we'd need probable cause. A lab report on water from an anonymous sample isn't enough. We'd need a victim to come forward, someone who was drugged and can testify. What about the missing people? Isn't this enough to reopen those cases?" "Maybe. Let me talk to the DA. But Torres, you need to be careful. If Red Rock Wellness finds out you're investigating them, they'll come after you. They have money and lawyers. Be smart." I should have listened to her warning. I published my first article in September 2005. I laid out everything I'd found, the pattern of disappearances, the connection to Red Rock Wellness, the Ascension Protocol, the drugged water, the suspicious residential community. I included statements from families, from David Reeves, from other former employees I'd tracked down. The article went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. News outlets picked it up. Cable news did segments on it. Suddenly, Sedona's disappearances were a national story, and Red Rock Wellness Corporation came after me with everything they had. First came the cease and desist letter, then the defamation lawsuit for $50 million, then the attacks on my credibility. They released statements saying I'd fabricated evidence, that I'd harassed their staff and clients, that I had a history of conspiracy-minded journalism. They painted me as an unhinged crusader attacking a legitimate business. Some of it worked. Some outlets backed away from the story. My magazine settled with Red Rock Wellness and fired me. But the pressure worked in another way, too. Families of the missing people found lawyers. They filed a class action lawsuit demanding access to the residential community to look for their loved ones. The Arizona Attorney General opened an investigation, and the FBI got involved. In November 2005, federal agents raided Red Rock Wellness Corporation. They seized records. They interviewed staff. They searched the compound, and they found the residential building empty, completely empty. No residents, no evidence that anyone had been living there recently. The rooms were furnished but sterile. No personal belongings, no signs of the 60 people Melissa had told me were living there. Dr. Marcus Aldrich was nowhere to be found. He'd left the country a week after my article was published. His last known location was Mexico, but he'd disappeared from there too. The FBI investigation dragged on for months. They analyzed financial records, tracked down former employees, interviewed everyone who'd ever had contact with Red Rock Wellness, but they couldn't find the missing people. And without bodies, without witnesses, without Dr. Aldrich to testify against, they couldn't build a criminal case. In March 2006, the FBI officially closed the investigation. They released a statement saying they'd found evidence of unethical business practices, but no evidence of criminal activity. Red Rock Wellness Corporation was dissolved, the property was sold, and 73 people remained missing. The families were devastated. I was destroyed. I'd promised them answers, I'd promised justice, and I'd delivered nothing. I didn't give up. I couldn't. For the next 2 years I investigated on my own. No magazine backing me, no income. I burned through my savings, sold my apartment, lived out of my car for months at a time. I was obsessed. I tracked down everyone who'd ever worked for Red Rock Wellness. I interviewed dozens of former employees. Most said the same things David Reeves had told me. They'd seen people enter the Ascension Protocol. They'd seen some of those people join the residential community, but they'd never seen what happened after that. Only senior staff had access to that part of the compound, and every single member of the senior staff had disappeared along with Dr. Aldrich. I focused on the supply chain. Someone had manufactured that sacred water. Someone had supplied the drugs. I traced shipping records, talked to distributors, followed money trails. It took me 8 months, but I found it. A pharmaceutical company called Neuralign Solutions, based in Delaware. They'd been Red Rock Wellness's primary supplier, and they were a subsidiary of a much larger corporation, Meridian Health Sciences. Meridian was a major pharmaceutical and medical device company, publicly traded. Billions in annual revenue. Why would a company like that be connected to a small wellness center in Arizona? I dug deeper. Meridian had a division called Cognitive Enhancement Research. They were developing drugs to treat PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Drugs that worked by making patients more receptive to therapy, more willing to confront and process traumatic memories. Drugs that increased suggestibility. The research had been promising but controversial. Critics said the drugs could be used for coercion or manipulation. Meridian couldn't test them properly because FDA approval was years away and human trials were strictly regulated, unless they found a way to test them outside the regulatory system. Using a wellness center in Arizona that targeted vulnerable people seeking transformation, I found a former Meridian researcher named Dr. Lisa Hammond, who'd worked in the Cognitive Enhancement Division from 1999 to 2004. She agreed to talk to me if I promised not to use her real name. Meridian knew what Red Rock Wellness was doing, she told me. It was an off-books testing site. We'd develop compounds, ship them to Arizona, and get data back on how they affected people in uncontrolled settings, response times, behavioral changes, long-term psychological effects. It was valuable data we could never get through legitimate trials. Did you know people were being drugged without informed consent? We were told they were willing participants, that they'd signed waivers. But yes, eventually I realized that wasn't true. I raised concerns internally. I was told to keep quiet, or I'd be terminated and blacklisted from the industry. So I quit. What happened to the people in those trials? The ones who didn't respond well? She was quiet for a long time. There were protocols for adverse events. If someone had a severe reaction, became unstable or non-functional, they were supposed to be transferred to a secure medical facility for monitoring and treatment. But I never saw documentation of those transfers. I asked once where the adverse event patients were being taken. My supervisor told me not to worry about it, that it was being handled. Do you think they were killed? I think Meridian couldn't afford for anyone to talk about what had been done to them. I think people who couldn't be fixed or controlled became liabilities, and I think liabilities were eliminated. I spent 6 more months building a case against Meridian. I found shipping records, financial transactions, emails between Meridian executives and Dr. Aldrich. I found evidence that Meridian had known about the disappearances and had paid to keep them quiet. In January 2008, I published everything. This time, I didn't go to a magazine. I created a website. I posted every document, every interview, every piece of evidence. I sent it to every major news outlet, every regulatory agency, every member of Congress. And this time, it stuck. The evidence was too solid to ignore. The Department of Justice opened a criminal investigation into Meridian Health Sciences. The SEC investigated the company for fraud. Multiple state attorneys general filed charges. Meridian's stock crashed. Executives resigned. The company faced billions in potential liability. But they still had money. And they still had lawyers. They fought for 2 more years. They tied everything up in legal battles. They claimed the documents were forged. They discredited witnesses. They argued that even if Red Rock Wellness had done something wrong, Meridian couldn't be held responsible for the actions of an independent contractor. And crucially, they had one argument that we couldn't counter. Where were the bodies? If 73 people had been killed, where were they? We'd searched. The FBI had searched. Private investigators hired by families had searched. We'd looked at the Red Rock Wellness compound. We'd looked at properties owned by Meridian or its subsidiaries. We'd searched the desert around Sedona. Nothing, no bodies, no physical evidence of murder, just missing people and suspicious documents. In 2010, the criminal case against Meridian collapsed. Without bodies, without Dr. Aldrich or any of the senior staff to testify, the prosecution couldn't prove murder. The best they could get was civil penalties for unethical drug testing. Meridian paid a fine, $800 million. It was the largest penalty ever imposed for illegal human experimentation, but nobody went to jail. And the 73 people were still missing. I gave up then. I'd spent 5 years chasing this story. I'd lost my career, my savings, my relationships. I'd done everything I could, and I'd failed. I moved back to Phoenix, got a job teaching journalism at a community college. I tried to rebuild my life. I didn't talk about Sedona. I didn't think about the missing people. I tried to forget. Then in March 2023, I got a phone call. It was Detective Sarah Chen from Sedona. She'd retired from the police force in 2015, but she'd never stopped thinking about the case. "Torres," she said, "I found something. Can you come to Sedona?" I drove up the next day. We met at a diner on the edge of town. She looked older, grayer, but her eyes were sharp. "2 months ago, I was hiking in the backcountry," she said, "about 20 miles northeast of Sedona. There are canyons out there that most people never see. Very remote. No trails. I was exploring one of them when I found a fence, 8 feet tall, chain link, topped with barbed wire, in the middle of nowhere. I followed it for about half a mile. It enclosed a box canyon, and there was a gate. It was locked, but the lock was old, rusted. I broke it." "What did you find?" She pulled out her phone and showed me photos, buildings, 5 or 6 structures, all made of cinder block, built into the canyon walls. Industrial-looking, no windows, solar panels on the roofs, a water tank, a generator. "I went inside," she continued. "The buildings were abandoned, but they'd been used recently. Within the last 10 to 15 years, there were beds, maybe 80 of them, medical equipment, IV stands, monitoring devices, and a crematorium." My blood went cold. "Did you find remains?" "Ash. A lot of ash. The crematorium had been used extensively. But there were also records, file cabinets full of documentation, patient logs, observation notes, medication schedules, and names, 73 names, all the people who disappeared." "You found them?" "I found where they died," she corrected. "The records are detailed, clinical, cold. They documented everything, how each person responded to the drugs, how their behavior changed, how they deteriorated mentally and physically, and when they died." She showed me photos of the documents, pages and pages of handwritten notes in what appeared to be Dr. Aldrich's writing. I read one at random. "Subject 34, Jennifer Huang, day 47 of Protocol C7, Subject continues to show extreme dissociative episodes, no longer responds to own name. No recognition of family photos, cognitive function severely impaired. Recommendation, terminate observation. Subject no longer viable for data collection. Administered final dose 03 to 15, 2003. Cremation completed 03 to 16, 2003. I had to stop reading. I felt sick. They were experiments, Chen said, all of them. Meridian was testing compounds to see how far they could push human consciousness, how much they could alter someone's personality, their memories, their sense of self. Red Rock Wellness was the intake facility. They identified candidates, got them to take the drugs voluntarily under the guise of spiritual awakening, and the ones who had severe reactions, the ones who couldn't be sent home because they'd been psychologically destroyed, they were brought here, to this compound, where Meridian could study them until they were no longer useful. And then they were killed. Have you reported this to the authorities? I asked. Not yet, Chen said. We wanted to talk to you first because here's the thing. I took samples of the ash from the crematorium. I sent them to a private lab for DNA analysis. It's going to take a few months to process, but if we can match the DNA to the missing people, we'll finally have proof. We'll have evidence of murder. We can reopen the criminal case against Meridian. They'll fight it. They'll claim the compound belonged to someone else. They'll argue the documentation is fake. I know, but this time we have bodies, or what's left of them, and we have detailed records. It might be enough. I helped Chen document everything. We photographed every page of the records. We mapped the compound. We collected samples. We did everything we could to preserve the evidence before reporting it. In June 2023, Chen went public. She called a press conference and presented everything we'd found. The story exploded, again, bigger than before. The families finally had answers. Terrible answers, but answers. They knew what had happened to their loved ones. They knew they'd been tortured, studied, and murdered in the name of pharmaceutical research. The DNA results came back in September. Positive matches for 47 of the 73 missing people. The other 26 couldn't be conclusively identified because the ash samples were too degraded. But it was enough. The Department of Justice reopened the criminal investigation. This time, they charged Meridian executives with conspiracy to commit murder, illegal human experimentation, and obstruction of justice. The trial is ongoing. I've testified twice. So has Chen. So have dozens of former Meridian employees who've finally agreed to talk now that there's physical evidence. Meridian is fighting, but they're losing. The evidence is overwhelming. Dr. Marcus Aldrich is still missing. There are rumors he's in South America living under an assumed name. Interpol is looking for him, but I doubt they'll ever find him. He's too smart, too careful, and he had too much time to disappear. The families are suing Meridian for wrongful death. The amount is in the billions. It won't bring their loved ones back. But maybe it will bankrupt the company. Maybe it will send a message that this kind of evil has consequences. I think about those 73 people often. I think about how they came to Sedona seeking transformation, seeking meaning, seeking connection to something greater than themselves. And they found it. They found a company that saw their vulnerability as an opportunity, that saw their desire for enlightenment as a weakness to exploit. They found people who looked them in the eyes, smiled and told them they were special, that they'd been chosen, that they were about to experience something profound. And then those people drugged them, studied them, broke them. And when they were no longer useful, they were cremated and their ashes were scattered in the desert. I think about Jennifer Huang, who just wanted to heal from a bad breakup. I think about Robert and Susan Mitchell, who wanted to reconnect after their children left home. I think about 73 people who made the mistake of trusting the wrong people in a place that promised enlightenment. I think about how easy it was to make them disappear. How the police called it voluntary, how the community called it transcendence, how everyone accepted that these people had simply chosen to walk away from their lives. Because that's what Sedona was known for. Transformation, change, people coming to the desert and becoming someone new. And in that environment, you could commit mass murder and call it a spiritual journey. You could destroy 73 mines and call it ascension. You could run a death camp 20 miles from a tourist town and nobody would look for it because everyone assumed the missing people had found what they were seeking. The desert keeps secrets, and Sedona kept this one for 20 years. I went back to that compound last month. The FBI has finished processing it as a crime scene. It's still there, locked behind that fence, but you can get to it if you know where to look. I hiked out there alone. It took me 4 hours through rough terrain. When I reached the box canyon, I stood outside the fence for a long time. The buildings are empty now. The equipment has been removed as evidence. But you can still see what it was. You can still feel the weight of what happened there. 80 beds in windowless rooms. People who'd been told they were ascending when really they were dying. I thought about the last moments of those 73 people. Did they know what was happening to them? Or had the drugs destroyed their minds so completely that they couldn't understand? Did they die confused, lost inside their own heads, unable to remember who they'd been? Or did they have moments of clarity, moments where they realized they'd been betrayed, that they'd trusted the wrong people, and now they were going to die for it? I'll never know. The records don't say. Dr. Aldrich documented their symptoms, their responses to various compounds, their deterioration, but he didn't record their fear. He didn't record their suffering. To him, they weren't people. They were subjects, data points. Their consciousness was just another variable to be measured and controlled. I've spent 18 years investigating this story. I've sacrificed everything for it. My career, my relationships, my peace of mind. People ask me if it was worth it. I don't know how to answer that. 73 families have closure now. They know what happened to their loved ones. They know they didn't abandon them. They know they were victims of something evil. Is that worth what I gave up? I think so. I hope so. But there are nights when I'm not sure. What I've learned from Sedona isn't about pharmaceutical companies or illegal experiments. Those are just the details. The real lesson is about how fragile identity is. How easy it is to manipulate consciousness. How drugs and isolation and repetition can dissolve a personality until there's nothing left but compliance. Meridian wanted to create compounds that would make people more receptive to therapy, more willing to change, more able to let go of trauma. In the right hands, with proper oversight and ethical guidelines, maybe that technology could help people. But in the wrong hands, it's a weapon. It's a way to erase someone without killing them, to make them disappear from the inside out. That's what happened to those 73 people. They didn't die quickly. They died slowly, over weeks and months, as the drugs systematically destroyed their sense of self. By the end, they didn't know their own names. They didn't recognize their families. They'd been erased. And when Meridian was done studying the erasure, they finished the job with cremation. I carry photographs of all 73. I look at them often. Normal people. Teachers, engineers, artists, parents, people with full lives who made one mistake. They trusted the wrong people in a place that promised transformation. And they got it. They were transformed into ash and scattered in a canyon where no one would ever find them. Except we did find them. It took 20 years. It took thousands of hours of investigation. It took Detective Chen refusing to give up even after she retired. But we found them. And now the world knows what happened in Sedona. Now the world knows that beneath the red rocks and the vortexes and the spiritual tourism, there was a laboratory where human consciousness was treated as a commodity, where people were broken and studied and discarded. The trial continues, the lawsuits continue, the investigations continue, but for me, the story is over. I've done everything I can, I've told the truth, I've given the families answers, and now I need to let it go, because if I don't, it will consume me the way it consumed Dr. Aldrich, the way it consumed everyone who got too close to the darkness in that canyon. Last week I drove through Sedona for the first time in 3 years. The town looks the same. The red rocks still glow at sunset. Tourists still fill the streets. Crystal shops and vortex tours and spiritual retreats still line the highway. Red Rock Wellness is gone, but a dozen other companies have taken its place. People still come seeking enlightenment, and most of them find something genuine. Most of them have positive experiences. Most of them go home enriched by the beauty of the landscape and the promise of transformation, but some of them don't. Some of them meet the wrong people, trust the wrong guide, drink water that contains more than water, and I wonder how many disappearances are still happening, how many people are classified as voluntary missing when really they've been taken, how many families are being told their loved ones chose to walk away when really they were carried away. I don't have answers to those questions, and I don't have the energy to investigate them. I've given 18 years to this story. That's enough. That has to be enough. I teach journalism now. I tell my students about Sedona, about how to investigate when authorities don't want you to, about how to keep pushing even when everyone tells you to stop, about how to live with the knowledge that sometimes you can't save everyone. Sometimes you can only document what happened and hope that the documentation prevents it from happening again. I don't know if I prevented anything. Meridian is being prosecuted, but pharmaceutical companies will always exist. Human experimentation will always be tempting when there's money to be made and regulations to avoid. Someone else will find another Sedona, another place where vulnerable people gather seeking meaning, and someone will see that vulnerability as opportunity. That's the real horror. Not what happened in Sedona specifically, but how easy it was. How little it took to make 73 people disappear. How simple it was to convince the world they'd chosen to vanish. How a few bottles of drugged water and a week of psychological manipulation could erase a lifetime of identity. We like to think we're solid, that our sense of self is fixed and unchangeable, that we know who we are and nothing can take that away from us. But it's not true. Consciousness is fragile. Memory is malleable. Identity is just a story we tell ourselves, and if someone changes the story, if they alter the brain chemistry that sustains the story, you can disappear from the inside out. You can become someone else, or no one at all. The trial of the Meridian Health Sciences executives lasted 6 months. I was there every day in the front row, watching them squirm. Their lawyers tried everything. They blamed Aldrich, who conveniently wasn't there to defend himself. They claimed Chen's documents and the ashes were fabricated. And, in their lowest argument, they suggested the victims were mentally unstable and had actively sought out risky treatments. It didn't work. The matched DNA from the ashes and Aldrich's meticulous records of each subject's deterioration were irrefutable. The verdict came down on February 4th, 2024. Guilty. All charges: conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, illegal human experimentation, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The sentences were harsh. Life in prison without the possibility of parole for the 3 top executives of the Cognitive Enhancement Research Division. 30 years for the other board members who knew and financed the operation. The families wept in the courtroom. They were tears of relief, of exhaustion, of a pain that had finally been acknowledged. I felt nothing. I felt only the silence the 73 had left behind. Justice is a small word for such a large crime. The civil suit was settled 3 months later. Meridian didn't stand a chance. Faced with the criminal convictions, the company was forced to pay the largest wrongful death settlement in United States history. $14 billion allocated to the victims' families and to medical ethics foundations. The company was broken up, its assets liquidated. Meridian Health Sciences ceased to exist. They weren't just fined, they were annihilated. And then, in August, we got the last piece of news. Dr. Marcus Aldrich. He wasn't found by Interpol in a South American paradise. He wasn't living a life of luxury under an assumed name. He was found by local police in a remote town in Peru, not for the murders, but for a public disturbance. He was living on the streets, confused, incoherent, suffering from a severe degenerative neurological disorder. The years of exposure to the very compounds he tested, they had taken their toll. He had become his own final experiment. He had erased himself. When they told me, I thought I would feel anger or a sense of poetic justice. But again, I felt that same emptiness. In medical reports, it said he had no memory of Arizona. He had no memory of Meridian. He did not remember the name Jennifer Huang. He was just a ghost, a shell, waiting for the end. He died in a public Peruvian hospital before extradition could be completed. His brain was donated to science, ironically. I went back to Sedona one last time, not to the canyon, not to the town, but to a place in the desert the families had chosen. With some of the settlement money, they bought a piece of land overlooking Cathedral Rock. They built a memorial, 73 simple pillars of red stone, each with a name carved into it. I was there when they dedicated it. I saw the now adult children that Robert and Susan Mitchell had left behind. I saw Jennifer Huang's parents. They weren't looking for answers anymore. They were just remembering. Detective Chen was there. She looked peaceful. She shook my hand. "It's over, Torres," she said. "We got it done." I nodded. I had all 73 names memorized. I had carried their photos for nearly 20 years. Now, I didn't need to. I looked at the memorial against the sunset, the stones glowing like the cathedrals I described at the beginning of my narration. The desert wasn't keeping their secrets anymore. We had forced them out. My name is Michael Torres. I'm 50 years old, and for the first time in a long time, I am not an investigative journalist. I'm just a man who told a story that needed to be told. I turned and walked back to my car, leaving the 73 to rest in peace, finally visible under the Arizona sky. And I didn't look back.